Alright folks, so I just got done playing the Callisto protocol. It took me 10 hours to beat, so I want to give you guys my review. So let's just start with the gameplay, right? The gameplay, you know what to expect in the gameplay. You're going to go through various dark halls, rooms, killing horrific enemies with your 3 types of gameplay combat systems, alright? The first one is the melee combat. I hate the melee combat. It's so clunky. It just doesn't work. It's like a broken rhythm game. Left, right, block, and attack the enemy, but it just doesn't work. You got your electric baton, your enemy's gonna hit you, but you gotta move left or right, then hit them. It's just not fun to play, and it only works when there's only one enemy in the area. If God forbid, if 3 or 4 enemies come at you, then this whole melee combat system fails. It's not even worth using, because you're not going to be able to take out all those enemies with your electric baton. The system just doesn't support the way the melee system is designed. Just does not support you taking out multiple enemies with that. It just doesn't work. I never used it. I did not use it at all unless when it was required in the boss fights. I just use my gun and the kinesis system. Now let's go to the gun system. You get a variety of guns, but the best gun is the head cannon, which is very similar to the plasma cutter from Dead Space. You can use it to dismember your enemies. You can also upgrade it to have a one-shot kill. You also got a couple of shotguns, and you also got an assault rifle, which is similar to the plasma rifle. Once again, they're very similar to their Dead Space counterparts, but they're watered down. They feel like budget versions of the Dead Space variations. They're fun to use. I prefer them over the melee combat, but once again, there's something lacking. Now you got something called the grip, which is very similar to kinesis from Dead Space. You can use it to lift up objects and throw them at your enemies, or to even lift up enemies to throw them at enemies. But the problem is that it runs out of charge, it runs out of battery. So if you use it to lift up an enemy, it eats up the charge super fast. So you got to use it. You got to be careful how you use it. You got to use it to lift objects and throw them at enemies. But the problem is that there's not enough objects in the environment to use them on the enemies. So you got to use it on the enemies itself. So you're out of charge. So you got to really manage that battery you got in your grip or kinesis while you're using your gun to back away and attack and use kinesis. That's how I played the game. But the thing that's missing is stasis from Dead Space. Where is the stasis? I don't know why did we remove that? Why did we forget about that? That was cool to use. I don't know. But that's the gameplay. That's the 3 ways you fend off enemies in the game. There's no puzzles. I'll let you know that. Now let's talk about the most important thing, the enemy design. The enemies in this game, I don't even know what they're called. I'm just gonna call them necromorphs. But the necromorphs in this game, man, they look more generic. They look like skeletons with slime or skin sagging or oozing off. They don't look as intimidating or threatening as the necromorphs from Dead Space. The necromorphs from Dead Space, man, they were brutal. They were ferocious. They were crazy, man. But in this game, it's just not the same. It just, once again, it feels like a budget, watered down Dead Space. I don't know what caused this, right? But the necromorphs, man, you don't even get the brutal deaths. The only brutal deaths you see are your own. You don't see other NPCs getting killed, chopped up, their hands being chopped up, blood flying around, suicides. You don't get to see any of that, man. I guess that detracts from the experience. That's what we expect from a game like this, especially coming from the maker of Dead Space. After playing Dead Space, why are we not seeing as crazy scenarios as we saw in Dead Space? I guess it's 2022. You can't trigger people's anxieties. Games are a safe place, right? For mental wellness and self-care. Absolutely ridiculous. Let's get to the story or the setting, right? Gotta talk about the setting. I like the setting. The moons of Jupiter have always intrigued me. Icy surface, right? Theorized to have water or oceans and life underneath. I wanted to see that in a game, and I got to see it. They did a good job. It's on a icy moon, the icy moon Callisto, right? With a prison on the top and a colony underneath. So you got your usual settings: prison blocks, mental wards, hospitals, mines, underground tracks. You got all that you've seen in horror games all the time. But once again, it's just not as good as the Ishimura or Titan Station from Dead Space 2. It feels very watered down. It feels like Tau Volantis from Dead Space 3, but not even as good as that. It's good, but it's just not as good. I just can't stop saying it's a watered down Dead Space. The story, once again, if you played Dead Space, you know what to expect, right? A pathogen is released, or a virus is released in prison, and everybody's getting infected and going crazy, and all hell breaks loose, and you gotta get out of jail, and you gotta find out who's behind all this. So you know what to expect. But the problem is, there's no psychological aspect of horror in this game. The game pretty much explains to you where this virus is coming from. But in Dead Space, you remember in Dead Space, it was the marker that was causing the necromorph to form, right? But we don't know who created the necromorphs, and we didn't know what the purpose of the marker was until Dead Space 3. That added to the horror aspect of the game. You don't know what it is. There's a sense of unknown that we haven't figured out. But that's not the case in this game. You know exactly what's going to happen, and you can see it from a mile away. And that, once again, a watered down Dead Space story, a budget Dead Space story. You guys see where I'm going with this? And then around the prison and the colony you go through, there's voice recordings. You pick up voice recordings. You tell of people who were there in the prison. It tells you what happens, gives you backstory. That's great. I enjoyed those, but they were super short. But there's no data logs or data recordings that you can read, text files you can read. You don't got any of that. That was in Dead Space, but it's not in this game. Why is this missing again? I don't know why it's missing. Now, one thing I really hated was the controls for switching your weapons. Oh my gosh, you gotta press, this is how it works. I played on PS5. You gotta press right on your D-pad. A list pops up. You gotta go up or down the list and choose a weapon. Once you choose a weapon, a slow as hell animation plays for you to switch the weapon. Then you switch the weapon. This does not work at all in intense situation where you gotta switch quickly. Why is not what happened to the tried and true weapon wheel? Why are we using this clunky menu-based system to switch weapons? Go back to the weapon wheel and use that. It's so super smooth, because otherwise it leads me to cheap deaths that were not based on my own fault. It's based on the system's clunky menu. I was literally having both of my hands on the D-pad so I could run with the stick and have my other hand on my D-pad. Like, it just doesn't work. It's terrible. But anyways, guys, I did beat the game. It took me 10 hours. I did enjoy the game, but you can't get I can't stop getting the feeling that this is a watered down budget Dead Space. There's a great foundation, but it's like a fixer up house. Yeah, the house is in a beautiful area. The floor plan is nice. The structure is big. You got a bunch of square feet, right? Square footage. But yeah, there's a lot of work need to be done. You got to put in stainless steel appliances. You got to install the wood flooring, the crown molding. You got to get some nice paint. You got to get furniture. You got to model the yard. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a great foundation, but I hope in the sequel, if we do get a sequel, they fix these problems. They add more brutality more to the enemy, make the enemy look very scary looking, very nasty looking, have a more of a psychological horror aspect to the game, and expand upon the story and make the setting more unique, more nasty, more brutal, like we saw in Dead Space. They could do it. They can do it. They've done it before. But I don't know what the problem was. Was it a lack of time, a lack of budget, not enough manpower? I don't know at all. But I give this game a 6.5 out of 10. If they fixed the problems I mentioned, this game would have been an easy 9 out of 10. But one thing I can tell you for sure is I enjoyed this a lot more than Ragnarok. Ragnarok was a piece of trash turd. Not even worth playing, man. Get that crap out of my face.